In Chapter 6 of The Great Gatsby, we are introduced with an interview between Gatsby and a reporter. This brings us into an explanation of Gatsby's true backstory. We discover Gatsby was born as James Gatz on a North Dakota farm. And though he's attended college at St. Olaf's in Minnesota, he dropped out after 2 weeks, loathing the humiliating janitorial work by means of which he paid his tuition. He worked on Lake Superior the next summer, fishing for salmon and digging for clams. One day, he saw a yacht owned by Dan Cody, a wealthy copper Mongol, and rolled out, warning him about impending storms. The grateful Cody took young Gatz, who gave his name as J. Gatsby, on board his yacht as his personal assistant. Traveling with Cody to the Barbary Coast and West Indies, Gatsby fell in love with wealth and luxury. Cody was a healthy drinker, and one of Gatsby's job was to look after him during his drunken bings. This gave Gatsby a healthy respect of the dangers of alcohol and convinced him not to become a drinker himself. When Cody died, he left Gatsby $25,000, but Cody's wife prevented him from claiming his inheritance. Gatsby then dedicated himself to becoming a wealthy and successful man. We note Nick sees neither Gatsby or Daisy for several weeks after their reunion at Nick's house. Though during a visit at Gatsby's place, Nick discovers Tom has stopped for a drink at Gatsby's house with Mr. and Mrs. Sloane, whom he has been out riding with. Gatsby seems to be nervous and agitated. Gatsby invites Tom and the Sloanes to stay for dinner, but they refuse. To be polite, they invite Gatsby to dine with him, and he accepts, not realizing the insincerity of the invitation. Tom is suspicious of Gatsby's lack of social grace, and also highly critical of Daisy's habit of visiting Gatsby's house alone. But he hasn't discovered Gatsby's and Daisy's love. The following Saturday night, Tom and Daisy go to a party at Gatsby's house. Tom has no interest, but he does want to keep an eye on Daisy. During the party, Tom upsets Daisy by telling her that Gatsby's fortune comes from bootlegging. Daisy is angry and it replies that Gatsby's wealth comes from a chain of drugstores that he owns. As the night goes on, the mood only progresses for the worse. Gatsby is unhappy as Daisy had had an unpleasant time. Gatsby wants things to be exactly the same as they were before he left Louisville. He wants Daisy to leave Tom so that he can be with her. Nick reminds Gatsby that he cannot recreate the past. Gatsby is distraught and protests that he can. He believes that his money can accomplish anything as far as Daisy is concerned. As he walks amid from the derbies from the party, Nick thinks about the first time Gatsby kissed Daisy. The moment when his dream of Daisy became the dominant force in his life. Now that Gatsby has her, Nick reflects Gatsby's dream is effectively over. In the chapter, we see the theme of social class and status. Gatsby's early life reveals the sensitivity to status. His humiliation at having to work as a janitor in college contrasts with the promise that he experiences when he meets Dan Cody, who represents Gatsby's dreams and hopes. Gatsby's actions shows his clear desperation to remove his lower-class identity and recast himself as the wealthy man he dreams about. Social class is also shown through the mannerism of Gatsby, as he seems to have as much money as the West Eggs, but he lacks their sense of social class and easy aristocratic grace. As a result, the East Eggs mock him for being new money. As the division between East Egg and West Egg shows, Even among the very rich, there are class distinctions. This chapter also shows how much of Gatsby's life is dependent on his dream. Gatsby realizes that his most powerful dream, Daisy, is virtually his identity. Yet we come to realize that Gatsby's portrayal of Daisy is itself a dream. Gatsby thinks of her as the sweet girl who loved him in Louisville, and blinding himself to the reality that she would never desert her own class and background to be with him. This leads to Gatsby wanting Daisy to return to a time before he left Louisville. The characters develop greatly throughout the chapter. Gatsby arguably experiences the most change. We can gather that Gatsby may have a bit of an obsession over Daisy, especially at the near end of the chapter where he wishes to fix everything. This, even though Gatsby may not realize it, creates an internal conflict for him as he wishes Daisy to be like in the good old days. A quote that shows how determined Gatsby is, "Can't repeat the past," he cried incredulously. "Why, of course you can." Chapter 5 shows Gatsby achieving his dream. Chapter 6 demonstrates just how deeply his dream runs. Much of the mystery surrounding Gatsby is cleared away in the chapter, and the reader learns more about who he really is, where he comes from, and his beliefs. We also can see clear holes in his facade. Under the pretense of sociability, the young woman invites Gatsby to join them for dinner. Although the writers know this invitation is rhetorical, Gatsby, however, is unable to sense the invitation's hollowness and agrees to attend. The group, disgusted at his behavior, sneaks out without him, marveling at his poor taste. Gatsby takes their words as face value, trusting them to mean what they say. While this is a positive trait in a way, reflective of Gatsby's good nature and dreamer's disposition, it also leads to another realization. No matter how much Gatsby is living the American dream, the old money crowd will never accept him. As much as he tries, Gatsby remains outside the inner workings, and nothing he can do will allow him full access to this. He will never be accepted by anyone but the newly riches. Chapter 6 also shows the conflict between Tom and Gatsby. Tom obviously dislikes Gatsby as he has no idea about who he really is and how he got his incredible fortune, as seen in the quote. "Who is this Gatsby anyhow?" demanded Tom suddenly. "Some big bootlegger?" One could interpret this as Tom's sense of insecurity that is the root cause of this internal and external conflict. Let us analyze a small excerpt of the story. The part is on page 107. "I sat on the front steps with them while they waited for their car. It was dark here in front. Only the bright door sent then a square feet of light following out into the soft black morning. Sometimes a shadow moved against a dressing room. Blind above gave way to another shadow, an indefinite precision of shadows that rogued and powdered in an invisible glass." This excerpt shows Fitzgerald using imagery in a very abstract sort of way, which also in turn assists in creating the mood for the part of the story. The word choice or syntax that has been incorporated in this text is very vivid and is also somewhat advanced and fancy. This fits rather well, as Nick's narration tends to be advanced and fancy. As we conclude this presentation, we would like to consider two questions to understand further the development of Gatsby. First, how does the chapter change the reader's perspective of Gatsby? And what does Fitzgerald intend from this change? Second, how does Gatsby's dream change from the start of the chapter? And how does this dream influence his character? As the chapter progresses onwards, one can see the primary purpose of Chapter 6 is to further develop the character of Gatsby. Slowly, the mirage of mystery disappears around him. But what does it expose?